and give you a brief introduction. So our first speaker, Cormac, is talking about vertebrates and their use of, sorry, my screen here is not showing, their use of some habitat in South Africa. Sorry, I haven't prepared super well to introduce you, Cameron, so I apologize. But
it's no problem. I can take it from there. I can take it from there. It's no problem at all.
Yeah, and thanks for joining remotely from where you are. Great to have that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't be there in person. Issues with South African administration. But today I'll be talking about the effects of linear infrastructure on vertebrates in Hluhluwe-iMfolozi Park and iSimangaliso Wetland Park here in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. This is a joint project between the Endangered Wildlife Trust, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and is located in Wildlife. So the data that I'm presenting today has recently been published in Global Ecology and Conservation. But to begin, although I'm sure everyone already knows this, but anthropogenic activities continue to rise globally, resulting in a need for larger road networks. This continual road network growth led to the creation of our field of study, with linear infrastructure ecology being formally recognized in the 1970s, making it relatively younger than other ecological fields. However, despite portions of the African continent having very high road network density, as can be seen in the figure from Mayer et al., linear infrastructure ecology remains in its infancy here on the African continent. Zooming into the African perspective, road network densities are expected to double by 2050. However, as previously stated, a large knowledge gap persists here in Africa, with South Africa having the highest linear infrastructure ecology publication rate. However, only 66 papers were published between 1954 and 2016, as found by Wendy, Collinson, and her team in their paper published in 2019. Now, using that same criteria, we did an additional search, and we have found an additional 65 African road papers that have been published since 2017. Now, why do we need roads? Roads are vital for societal function, allowing for the efficient transfer of goods and services. Roads do also have some minor positives for the natural environment, providing pathways for movement, food sources for scavengers, and heat sources for thermoregulation. However, these minor positives often directly lead into the negatives that roads pose to the environment, being direct causes for wildlife mortality, creating barriers to movements and gene flow, breaking up environments, and aiding invasive species dispersal. My study took place in Hluhluwe-iMfolozi Park, one of South Africa's oldest reserves, proclaimed in 1895, and the birthplace of rhino conservation effort, as well as iSimangaliso Wetland Park, South Africa's third largest reserve and a UNESCO World Heritage and Ramsar wetlands. Both parks are unique in South Africa, being that they have high traffic public roads that pass through them, with an average peak road vehicle pass-through rate of 1,500 vehicles per day. Per hour. Looking at Hluhluwe-iMfolozi, the road that we studied was the R618, otherwise known as Corridor Road. It has 18 kilometers within the park, and it's surrounded by mountainous terrain and savanna habitat, and has numerous traffic calming measures and a speed limit of 60 kilometers throughout. Sorry, just there. Now, looking at iSimangaliso Wetland Park, the road we surveyed was the R22, which has 15.5 kilometers within the park area, and we added an additional 1.25 kilometers of survey area on either side in areas that had very low human presence, with only 5 permanent residences per kilometer. And this was done for one-to-one comparison purposes. The road is surrounded by fragmented wetland areas, including Muzi Pan and a portion of the Mkuzi River floodplain. The terrain is mostly flat, and the road has only has traffic calming measures at the entrances to the park area, and also has a speed limit of 60 kilometers per hour within the park.
The aims of my study were to determine the effect that the R618 and R22 had on vertebrate mortalities in Hluhluwe-iMfolozi and iSimangaliso Wetland Park, with some predictions being that smaller vertebrates would experience higher mortality rates, with highest rate among total form, with flatter areas experiencing higher rates, and that vehicle traffic patterns, climatic conditions would be the main mortality driving factors. My objectives were to compare the vertebrate mortality species assemblages between the two roads and to identify any mortality hotspots and key mortality driving factors. Samples were collected by 2 observers during driven surveys conducted twice a day at sunrise and sunset for 6 days per site every month from March of 2021 till March of 2023. Photographs, GPS coordinates, road habitat and climatic conditions, as well as the presence of animal paths or existing traffic calming measures and crossing structures were collected per carcass, along with the number of vehicles per day that were, and with number of vehicles being collected from camera trap images. Moving on to the results, we found a total of 1,606 mortalities from 108 species across both sites, with 508 individuals from 81 species in Hluhluwe-iMfolozi Park, with the highest monthly mortality rate of 4 carcasses per kilometer in March of 2021. iSimangaliso Wetland Park had the remainder of carcasses. However, 606 of these individuals were from a single species, Pixecephalus idyllis, pictured in the top right, with all of those 606 individuals recorded from a single week across multiple mass death events in March of 2023. These 606 individuals were subsequently removed from hotspot and statistical analyses due to the skewing effect that it had. This left 438 individuals from 74 species, Pixecephalus idyllis included in that 74 species, in iSimangaliso, with the highest monthly mortality rates in April of 2021, with 4.5 carcasses per kilometer. Amphibians had the highest mortalities in both the Hluhluwe-iMfolozi and iSimangaliso Wetland Park, despite the removal of those mass death event individuals, while reptiles had the lowest mortalities in Hluhluwe-iMfolozi, and birds had the lowest mortalities in iSimangaliso Wetland Park. The first wet season in both locations had the highest mortality rate, and the second dry season in both locations had the lowest mortality rate. The changes in mortality between both wet and dry seasons across years between seasons in Hluhluwe-iMfolozi Park were constant, with a change of 4.6 carcasses between wet seasons and as well as between dry seasons, and a between wet and dry season change of 7.6 carcasses per kilometer, while mortality rate in iSimangaliso Wetland Park varied per season across both years. Looking at the hotspots of mortality in Hluhluwe-iMfolozi Park, we find that in the first year of survey, there was a higher density of mortalities, as well as high densities in wet season than in dry season. The highest density of mortalities was found in the 2nd kilometer of road after the Matuba entrance, just before the Inyalazi entrance to the park. This is indicated by the yellow ring. While mortalities were distributed across the full length of the R618 in Hluhluwe, and there were numerous significant hotspots detected, indicated by black stars. Only this kilometer of road before the park entrance remained a significant hotspot across multiple seasons, only becoming non-significant during resurfacing activities taking place during the dry season of the first year. Moving on to the R22 in iSimangaliso, mortalities were again distributed across the length of the road within park boundaries, with higher mortalities during the first year of survey and during wet seasons. Mortality densities were highest near water sources, with detected significant hotspots located next to uncontrolled dirt road and the flooded Mkuze floodplain that was during the second wet season.
However, no hotspots were significant across seasons or years. Of these factors examined for their effect on vertebrate road mortality, factors that had a physical presence in the environment showed higher significance in their impact, with the absence of standing water having the highest significance. Other significant factors included variables that involve how the road was designed, the presence of precipitation, and the lighting conditions, with more carcasses being found during surveys conducted during sunrise. So just to recap, the Hluhluwe-iMfolozi Park had a higher diversity of species within the vertebrate road mortality record, while iSimangaliso had a higher number of mortalities, with seasonal mortality rates remaining constant within Hluhluwe-iMfolozi, and amphibians having the highest number of mortalities in both study locations. Mortality hotspots were located near water sources in iSimangaliso, and within the portion of the R618 before a tourist entrance to Hluhluwe-iMfolozi Park. Physical variables such as standing water or the absence thereof, and road slope had larger influences on mortalities, and the predicted variables were not the most influential at location level. Some observation, although not included in this portion of the project, were that there were higher scavenging rates in Hluhluwe-iMfolozi Park, with carcasses remaining for only a day at a time, unless having extreme temperature, and that iSimangaliso had a higher rate of reptile activity, so this being both dead and live individuals recorded. When looking at the listed threats to the identified 108 species, only 29 of these species had habitat change listed as potential threat species on the IUCN Red List. But all of that being said, both roads showed needs for improved mitigation measures, whether this is improved placement of speed humps, the seasonal changing of speed limits, or just the placement of traffic cameras to try and reduce speed, to reduce speeding vehicles. But there is also still a lot of future work that still needs to be completed within and around systems included in my project, to gain the full picture as to how these roads and other linear structures are affecting the wildlife in Hluhluwe-iMfolozi Park, iSimangaliso Wetland Park, as well as protected areas around South Africa. Some of the future work that I plan to delve into in the next coming years are listed on the slide. I would also just like to, that being said, I would like to thank the NRF for providing funding, Forward Wildlife for providing the vehicle that we used, as well as our partner organizations like the Located in Wildlife and the Endangered Wildlife Trust, as well as all the other individuals and organizations that made this research possible. Thank you for giving me time to speak there. That is my talk finished.
Great, thank you. And I again apologize for the fumble at the beginning here. So we have some folks online. Feel free to post questions in the chat. And also, are there any questions in the room? I have one hand. Give me a second and I'll run out the microphone.
I'm curious if the observers removed the roadkill that they observed or not, or is it just not there?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The question was, is the roadkill just left on the road, or are they removed once they're surveyed?
So when I was doing my surveys, I would remove the carcasses because we were collecting tissue samples for genetics testing in case we could try and identify things that were severely flattened to try and figure out what species they were. But then we also had a number of large mammals as well, which are removed by park officials to try and mitigate any accidents that might happen. So during surveys, yes, during my surveys, yes, they were removed. But also while doing surveys, I actually observed valuable part that would actually follow my vehicle to remove any species any carcasses that I missed during my survey. So they're removed by both the humans that are present in the area as well as other scavenging fauna. So scavenging fauna including yellow carts, slender mongoose, etc.
Take your values and estimate what a total roadkill might be for those species.
So for which species, sorry?
For all of them.
I think for any of the species, given that you're presumably only detecting a proportion, how would you estimate the total roadkill?
So there are a couple of papers that have spoken about estimate changes between driven and walked surveys. Unfortunately, walked surveys are not an option in this park due to the presence of lions and other large carnivores. But it's probably between 4 to 10 times higher than what we found. We only survey, the road is active for over 17,000 hours a year. It's likely a severe under record of just how many animals are dying in this area. There's also no information as to the population densities of these smaller vertebrates. So when it comes to the larger vertebrates in the park, like lions and zebra and wildebeest and so on, there are only 38 lions in the whole of the Hluhluwe-iMfolozi Park. There's no lions in that section of iSimangaliso. For example, with wildebeest that were hunted to extinction in the park, they've only got about I think it's 1,300 head of wildebeest in the park at the moment. So those large mammals, their populations are very closely monitored. But again, when it comes to herpetofauna, birds, small mammals, even mesocarnivores, there's no recording of population sizes within the parks. So even trying to go based off of the loss to the population size, it would be very difficult to actually estimate those numbers. But these are things that we would like to try and look at in the future. Just even if we have to go down to looking at scat around the road and scat density around the roads to try and figure out just how many animals that we can detect around the roads. It's quite a difficult question to answer in the area, just given the nature of the area and the species that we have to tackle in that area.
Great, thanks. Let's give Cameron a round of applause.